Is that something that this group will consider, or is that not in our scope?
Well, I think that Richard will take us in directions that would possibly allow that conversation once you look at options. I don't want to prejudge where the conversation is going to go, but I think that's up to our facilitators.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. And just make sure we come back to it as we do it. Yeah, Laura, and then I'm going to move us in another minute or so. I'm going to move us to the next one if I can.
I just want to, I was at many of the meetings, if not a lot, I was at many of the meetings. I still think that Fairfield Hills is an option, and that I did not hear succinctly that it was off the table.
Okay.
So I just wanted to be clear about
Yeah,
that.
so again, let me just say it again, because I think these are all really important things. All options are on the table. At the beginning of next meeting, you will see all of them in writing. So it's not going to be just like rolling through them and you have to take notes yourself. And so I can assure you that many of the options you've raised tonight, I already know are in the mix, and because I've seen them. And I can assure you that we'll work through them, and Jeffrey will come back to your question as well, okay? So can I move us to the next one? Is that all right? Yeah, last comment, Mary Ann.
I think every parent of every elementary school student loves their school as passionately as Sandy Hook people love their school. So I think that's a very difficult discussion for us to mix in with this. I felt like what I hear, keep the Sandy Hook family together, it means keep them together in their current form, not with other things thrown in. And I think that's particularly important over the next few years when they are going to have some unique needs that are not the same as necessarily what the rest of the community has. So that was, that doesn't mean we couldn't ultimately build a school that had enough flexibility that, 10 years down the line, if the community changed, we had some options to do things like that.
Okay. These are all things I can promise you we will come to. I'm going to move us. I'm going to actually let John, because John hasn't said anything yet tonight. And then I'm going to move us on. John.
As a Board of Education member, I'd like to invite all of you down to the Sandy Hook School and walk into it so that you can feel the happiness and the love that goes on in that building. I think all of you sitting here making these decisions have to understand and feel what that building is all about, and it will help you tremendously decide what direction we all should be going in. And please, when you go in, you have to announce yourself in advance. Please don't just stay there 5 minutes. You need to walk through the halls, up and down, and see for yourself how fabulous those children and staff are doing. Don't get me wrong, we're a long way off, but you will come out of there a different person. And as you sit here making these decisions about these children and parents and teachers and whatever, it will help you tremendously.
Great.
And I'm going to keep track of who goes and who doesn't.
Thank you, John. Okay. I'm going to move us on to another one, okay? You still with me? All right. Here we go. Perceptions and emotional status of faculty, staff. I'm 4 bullets down, right, from the top. Perceptions and emotional status of faculty, staff should influence recommendations. Any thoughts about this? Kathy?
I think it's really important that we consider the staff. The only issue is that I think maybe Pat and Mary Ann might be the only ones, and I don't know if Laura or anybody for the Board of Ed. We weren't in those meetings. Those were not public meetings, and so I don't know how that's going to get communicated to us in some form or another. That's kind of the only issue I have. I have friends that are staff members there, but I don't know as a group how they feel.
I'm not going to talk about how they feel as much as why it's on the paper. And again, the derivation of these themes were teased out from conversations with constituent groups. And every single group identified the importance of considering the feelings of the faculty and staff as critical to influence the decision-making. So again, that's a separate question from what you're asking, but I just want to be sure people know why things are on this piece of paper. It doesn't indicate a direction or a choice as much as the need to consider that there is a point of view held by those constituents.
But Pat, if we don't know it, how can we react to it?
Well, I think you will at some point. I'm trying to follow the lead of the facilitator in
okay.
terms of when we talk about the content, you know, lift the hood on some of these.
Now, for this one would be a good time. You hit the jackpot.
Well, I can share with you that, I mean, there are 3 statements in a row there that talk about the need to consider the points of view of the most highly impacted groups from the event on December 14. I can tell you that in each of the groups there is diversity of opinion. There is no one point of view that emerged as collecting or representing where every member of that group stood. And the other phenomena, as you can imagine, is that when I revisit some of those same groups and have conversations as we move away from the date of December 14, some of those feelings change over time, and they change in a variety of directions. So there's no one point of view that we can say this is where everybody stands in that group, and it makes the decision ever more complicated because of that. I cannot tell you that every single teacher or faculty member or staff member at San Diego School that I have met with feels X or Y, because that's not the case. The same with the parents of the victims and the parents of the survivors and the parents of other Sandy Hook families. There is, again, a diversity of opinion across every one of those groups, and that opinion is subject to change over time. That's not to say there isn't very strong feelings held by some members of each of those groups, and those strong feelings are on the ends of the continuum of that perspective.
Laura?
Well, I have a question or a suggestion. If we're truly going to keep the staff and the faculty at Sandy Hook in the loop, would it be somewhat of an idea to have a committee that either they can share their thoughts as we go through this process, or if there's a spokesperson on behalf of the school? I don't know if it's the right way to go.
I don't think there is a single voice. I don't think there is a spokesperson for the perspectives of the individuals at Sandy Hook School. That's part of the challenge of this process, is that there is no one voice there. There is a diversity of perspectives, strongly held opinions on the polls, and a position along every step along that continuum.
You know, I think as we're going through these bullets one by one, I would imagine there'll be none that we would disagree with. But when I look at them, it looks like there are probably 2 or 3 groupings. So there's the emotional perception, there's the sight, and then there may be 1 or 2 others, because I haven't really done my own facilitation yet. If we were to group them, like there are 3 of these that say emotion perception, I haven't been in enough of the meetings to know, and maybe there's not, which would isn't going to help with the complexity or not. But is there a priority, or does one weigh higher than the others? For instance, the faculty and staff are going to be there long after the children are gone. Do we take theirs and say that's a higher weight? Do we consider, from a Board of Education point of view, to rotate the teachers from Sandy Hook at the end of a year to one of the other elementary schools and, you know, kind of move them around? Because I'm just thinking, you know, kind of out loud. Because you got a new teacher, right, new secondary. Now, that would break up the faculty and the Sandy Hook thing, but maybe some would like to be there, some wouldn't. So I don't know if there's a priority within those groups or not. So I'm just asking the question.
Mary Ann, let me pull a couple other people in before we...
I'm not going to speak for the staff. I can't speak for the staff. I think Pat articulated pretty well that there's as much diversity of opinion in the building as there is in the community. But I do know almost universally everybody has been very happy with the process that Pat has put together to date and are comfortable that we're going down a path that is exploring options in a reasonable and well thought out manner. And I guess my opinion would be, let's let that process roll out a little further. We really haven't even heard a lot of information about what the sites are, and I think if we kind of, I'm willing to make another leap of faith, my second leap of faith in a week, that if we let this process go down a little further, I think it will become more apparent. I don't have any preconceived ideas. I just feel like I know it's part of all of our very type A personalities to say, but I got to think through where we're going to end up, and I would really encourage everybody to let's just listen and let this process work. And a meeting or two from now, we might have to ask some of these hard questions, but I don't know that we have to do that now before we've really laid it all out.
Paul?
I just wanted to come back to one of the points that Pat made, which is so important, I think. No one would diminish the importance of making sure that we're taking the faculty and staff opinions into account, and certainly the families of the victims and survivors. I think those are paramount. But the time factor is something that we should put a little bit more thought into as we go through this. We started having these conversations just 60 days or so after it happened, and maybe we should just think of ways as the process unfolds and we're talking about different options, just put a specific call out there to make sure that the public is engaging, communicating, participating, so that we can keep a pulse on what people are really feeling about the process.
Let me tell you how this has played out in other processes I've done. Go ahead, please.
For the people listening at home, they won't be able to hear you unless, that's why everyone in the room
My
can
wife,
hear you.
my wife always says that's a great thing. So let me tell you, a point like this plays out in other processes that I've been a part of or led. These three that, Bob, that you rightly clustered together, that are emotional and perceptions, right? As Pat has said, and I think as many of you probably have, I would imagine, have experienced, and maybe I'm wrong about this, is as you've talked to faculty and staff or families of victims or survivors or parents in the community, that there is no universal point of view on this because of the nature of the issue. And I think one of the things that this body comes together to do is, as we're moving through the process, is to continually have the conversation, what do we know, right? What have we heard? Who have we talked to? What do we listen? And since none of us may have a monopoly on that knowledge, because we're all talking to different people at different times, under different circumstances, what we're really relying on, and this has been true in other processes I've led, is what's our collective knowledge? How can we collectively talk about this as we're moving through this and say, okay, so what do we know about the perceptions and emotional status? And as we're working through decisions, let's talk about those different perspectives. Not now as a definitional thing, but as we're actually working through different options in the context of those options. That's been my experience with these kinds of perceptions and emotions and how to deal with them most productively, where we don't end up in a definitional kind of cul-de-sac. Does that work